Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome to Let's Talk. We're going to be talking about what happened in the border region of India, where Indian soldiers and the Chinese soldiers got into a skirmish. The results were absolutely devastating. 20 Indian soldiers were killed in a clash with the Chinese forces in the disputed Himalayan borders recently. Ladies and gentlemen, what do you make of this? The incident follows rising tension between these two countries for the last 45 years at least. That's what we know. And the dispute comes when India and China claim sovereignty over their border region's disputed territory. Who is right and who is wrong? What is the strategic interest of China and what's the strategic interest of India? And what's going to happen? Modi's government that has shown very aggressive foreign policy in the neighborhood, especially around the Muslims, would they now flex their muscles in the same way towards the Chinese, a superpower, a nuclear power? The problem is, it's a trilateral problem. India is a superpower, or at least nuclear power, emerging superpower. Pakistan is a nuclear power, and China is a superpower also with nuclear. 3 nuclear powers congregating over one small area, and there is conflict in that area. The land is being disputed between India, China and Pakistan. Pakistan is slightly out of it right now, but we have seen what happened in that region in the lethal fist fight. Literally, Chinese soldiers beat the life out of the Indian soldiers by their bare hands, apparently not by guns, by sticks and stuff like that. 20 soldiers were brutally murdered. What do you think of it? Let's invite our guests and let's bring them in our conversation today. Let me see who has joined us. We've been joined by Duncan Bartlett, editor for Asian Agenda. Duncan, hi.
Good afternoon.
How are you?
I'm good, thank you.
I'm going to have to make sense of who is... Oh, there you go. I now can see you full. Very good. I'm going to come to you in a minute, but let's go to the next of our guests, Lieutenant Imran Chowdhury, ex-Bangladeshi Army, also a geopolitical analyst. Mr. Imran Chowdhury, are you there?
Yes, I am.
Welcome to our program. How are you?
I'm fine, thank you. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you very much.
Pleasure to be here with you to talk about...
We will be discussing this in details, and I'll come to you with questions in a minute. Let me introduce the remaining guests, if you just hold on with me. Bear with me for a minute. Muhammad Tawsif Rahman is a political analyst from Kolkata, India. Tawsif Rahman, welcome to our program.
Good evening, sir, and good evening to all my panelists. Hope everything is fine.
Thank you very much. And we've also been joined by Professor Bill Bowring, who is Professor at International Law, Birkbeck College. Professor, how are you?
I'm good. Could you increase your volume a little bit, please?
My volume? You need to increase the volume on your end. My volume is very loud. We'll try.
It's not for me, so...
Okay.
Also, will we be able to see you, please?
Can you see me? I don't think you can see me.
No, I can just see a rather natty kind of a drawing.
Okay, well, currently you won't be able to see me, so you just have to bear with me. I don't know what platform we're using. If we're using Zoom, then you should be able to see.
This is Zoom.
Okay, well, I don't know why. Rest of the guests, can you hear me?
Yeah, it's pretty audible.
Okay. Professor Bowring, I'm afraid we don't know what to do with the audio.
No, I can hear you better now, so I think we'll speak closer.
And can you gentlemen see me?
I'm sorry?
Okay, fine. You will have to just see the icon, that's all, I'm afraid, deliberately, otherwise there is a disturbance in our system. Let's go straight to the issue. Starting off Asian Agenda, Duncan Bartlett. Duncan Bartlett, tell us what happened and why it happened.
Well, I think that only a very few people actually were eyewitnesses to what actually happened at that border up on the high Himalayas. We do know, don't we, that 20 Indian soldiers died, and the account suggests that there was some sort of physical confrontation with the Chinese troops. The Chinese say that some of the Indian soldiers crossed the border illegally, and that's when the fight started. And it appears that some of the Indian soldiers might have been pushed or hit with sticks, thrown down into a valley, and that's where some of them died in a cold river. There are also allegations that some of them were beaten to death. Now, the Chinese have said very little about what happened. In fact, they're rather playing down the story. But the Indian media have grabbed hold of it because, of course, it's a very shocking incident. It's the first time since the 1960s that there's been a death on this scale on that very contested border between India and China. But the trouble is, of course, when it goes out into the Indian media, the facts of the case get mixed up with a lot of rumours and fake news. And unfortunately, on platforms like Facebook and so on, people have been putting up videos from quite unrelated incidents, claiming they've been taking film of what happened up there on the border. And it's not the case at all. In one particular incident, there was some pictures that were used from a Nigerian incident that were claimed to be pictures of the fight. Not true. So it's difficult to get to the facts. But what we do know is that the diplomatic reaction has been very immediate, and I would say, from my perspective, very encouraging, because the Indian Defence Minister went to Moscow earlier on this week, soon after the incident, and now both the Chinese side and the Indian side have both issued statements saying that they will do their best to reduce tension on this border. Now, we can talk later on about what practical things they might be able to do in order to prevent another incident of this kind. But what we haven't seen is, despite the very angry, sometimes actually even hysteric reaction in parts of the Indian media, there's been a calm response on the diplomatic front. And thank goodness for that, because as you said in your introduction, both India and China are nuclear-armed powers, and not only that, they also have enormous conventional forces. So anything that had escalated this incident from just beyond a terrible death of 20 soldiers into a battle or even a war could have been catastrophe for Asia and would have had enormous implications for the whole world.
Apparently, between China and India, there had been an agreement to de-escalate the Chinese presence in the Galwan Valley. And even after that, the Chinese troops were still in the Galwan Valley. And this was a breach. The line was set up, though. And so this then was catapulted into the limelight because a group of Indian troops then went to check on a patrol to see what was happening. And when they arrived and they saw those temporary posts that the Chinese troops have built, the Indian soldiers dismantled it. And China had left very few soldiers on the ground, and because of that, Indian soldiers took advantage perhaps and dismantled their temporary post. And then what happened was a larger number of Chinese troops arrived, and with using batons, sticks with spikes and metal bars and rods, they beat up as many of the Indian soldiers present as possible, and in that process 20 died. That's what's been reported widely by various reputable institutions. Let's talk to Mr. Imran Chowdhury, a former ex-Bangladeshi Army lieutenant. Mr. Imran Chowdhury, what's your take on this? What happened?
Well, it's something that I can't say that this has taken place. It's all very, very absolute speculations, because what happened is this border is neither belong to China. It's actually the Indo-Tibet border. And we are all seem to have got a very selective forgetfulness of forgetting that Tibet was engulfed and taken over by China in 1959. Now, this Galwan Valley, there is a road that goes to Pakistan's seabed, which is the Karakoram Highway. And India has been building a road connecting or reaching up to the Galwan. The meaning of Galwan is dacoits, is the valley of the dacoits. This is in 1842, the British named it Galwan Valley. The river was called Galwan. So it is a place where the dacoits used to live. So I don't understand, how do we know that Chinese army has literally physically assaulted Indian army with batons, with all those spiky barbed wire fencing thing put into the batons? And we seem to don't know how many of Chinese have died, because India is a democratic country. It has to be answerable to its people and say that I have lost X number of soldiers, because you have to have the funerals, you have to let the next of the kin know. But in case of China, the country has is a problem with opacity, because they are not, liable to say anything to anyone. They can just do anything, and they have been doing it since 1949. And we people have, for some reason, turned a real blind eye. So yeah, I'm quite doubtful about the whole incident.
Mr. Chowdhury, I have got a question for you. Do you think this has anything to do with India unilaterally cancelling Article 370 of the Indian Constitution that gave Jammu and Kashmir a degree of autonomy, and this resulted in China also fearing that India would exert its influence and control of that region, the 38,000 square miles that India has claimed China has taken over. Do you think it's to do with in Kashmir?
No, it hasn't got to do nothing with Kashmir. And the 370 of Indian Parliament Act is a myth. It would allow the Kashmiris to actually develop themselves. The 370 was gagging them from developing.
But the Kashmiris don't say, Mr. Chowdhury, Mr. Chowdhury, hold on, Mr. Chowdhury, Mr. Chowdhury, hold on.
To 1948, the referendum which was supposed to happen under the UN guidance, that didn't happen. So this is a very, very complicated issue.
But Mr. Chowdhury, I have to ask you. Hold on, Mr. Chowdhury. Mr. Chowdhury, hold on. I have to ask you a question before you go on to giving other aspects. You've just said India has done a favor to Kashmiris by repealing 370, Article 370. Kashmiris don't agree with you at all.
Kashmiris don't agree because who doesn't agree? Because the people who have been fed from across the border, they are the one who don't agree. But this 370 actually
it sounds like
enhance the plight of the people of Kashmir. It will change the total spectrum of Kashmiri people.
Well, that's not
allow them to develop. So if you are not allowing them to develop, that's a different issue altogether.
Well, let's ask Professor Bowring the same question. Professor Bowring, I want to come to you. Obviously, the reasons are varied, but according to Mr. Chowdhury, side issue though, but I need to clarify, India repealing Article 370 actually has enabled Kashmiris to breathe and grow. Otherwise, he was strangling them. Do you agree with that? We can't.
About the tension between China and India.
Yeah.
So if I could just pick up 2 points from Duncan. One where I totally agree with him, which is when he mentioned Moscow and the role of Moscow. I think Russia has really a lot to do with what is going on recently, not least because India is a traditional ally of Russia. And even though, of course, there's a big difference between Russian power and Chinese power these days, I think it's very much in Russia's interest, actually, to keep India on side. And the other thing where I disagree with Duncan, not very much, is when he used the word border. Because one of the real problems here is there is no border. There's a line of actual control, as we all know, which is the result of the extremely unfortunate war in 1962, which has never really been resolved. So here we have a territory where there is no border, and both sides are doing their utmost to construct all kinds of infrastructure to show that they actually do control something. And this is actually a place that nobody would really want to control, except for the fact that some kind of national pride is involved. So as an international lawyer, what interests me very much is that nobody has raised international legal issues, as a matter of fact. And China is capable of being very legalistic, as it is in the South China Sea at the present time. And China is a great adherent to traditional international law, but neither India nor China are raising international legal issues. Kashmir, that is a different kettle of fish. And that actually raises very dangerous questions between India and Pakistan. But that is not our topic tonight.
Discussion, yeah, true.
But my point still stands. I know the legal issue, and I was going to come to it later on. I know, Professor, you are very perceptive about the conversations that we're going to have. May I ask you the same question as I've asked already? Some analysts say that the whole reason this happened is because India repealed the 370 article of its constitution, which gave the possibility of it doing the same to other disputed regions. Do you think there is any mileage in it? And do you agree with Mr. Chowdhury's assessment that repealing Article 370 actually gave more freedom to the Kashmiris?
Well, I think nothing is resolved in Kashmir. That's the problem. And this is why it's become so contentious who is speaking to whom in Britain, as a matter of fact, over Kashmir. Given that India and Pakistan have absolutely different positions. I think the one thing one can say for certain about Kashmir is that China does not have an interest, as far as I know. I can't see any interest that China has. I think Russia has an interest, of course, because they are very concerned with what's going on in Afghanistan. That is absolutely something of concern to Pakistan. And Russia, of course, wants to bolster India to the extent that it can, without, of course, getting directly involved in any conflict. And Russia has already got far too much on its plate in the Middle East, as a matter of fact, in Libya, increasingly Syria, and so on. I think Russia needs to keep India, though, intact and as powerful as it can be in relation to China.
Okay.
That is not Kashmir.
Okay, well, let's go to the only Indian we have in our program. Not being racist here, but we've kept him silent for too long. Mohammed Tawsif Rahman, I'm really sorry I've kept you out of the conversation.
It's all right, sir.
I allowed the non-Indians to speak their mind so that you can have the final say. Now tell us, what's the mood on the ground in India over the death of 20 soldiers? What's the mood on the ground about the border region? And do mention about Kashmir because it is a contentious issue.
Well, good evening, everyone, again. And it was an honor to listen to everyone because we all have a prestigious panelist today and everyone have their own opinion. And I'm very glad to hear everything, whatever they discussed. But as you're asking me that, what is the ground reality right now? And today's date, the news is China is going to back out because we had a very major discussion with the General Army and the commanders between the Indo-China discussion, where it was a drift and there was a problem which is happening from last 1 month. The problem is China always had bad intentions. They always had bad intentions. And from 1962 till 2020, they always want to occupy some space. And that's a sign of big greediness. You know, they always have an eye on our land. You know, if you go in a technical basis, you know, it's not about being technical, which land is going where. Galwan Valley, as the army said, Mr. Chaudhary, that it goes through Pakistan. I do agree, but the problem is that when India says it is our land, that means it's our land. You know, and China has been doing this since 1962. Now, when you speak about those martyrs, we call in Hindi, Shaheed, you know. So there is a situation where it's a very sad situation altogether. The atmosphere is very bad because we have lost our soldier. But at the same time, we are really proud that we have lost our soldiers battling with China. You know, there was a treaty between Indo and China that there's a place where no one will carry arms and no one will carry anything where I can hurt you. Now, these Chinese, as I said, they have a bad intentions, always, you know. So they were carrying some baseball bats,
you can't say that about all Chinese. These Chinese, that's quite a sweeping statement, isn't it?
No, there's a difference between Chinese and this Chinese government. You know, like India and Indians. Yeah. You know, if someone want to connect with Indians and if there's something, that doesn't mean India is bad. So I am not talking about the China and the whole people. I'm just talking about those Chinese government and they have bad intention. You know, our army people, they went bare hands. They were nothing. They were carrying nothing. And they started drift between these two people and we lost our people. But the thing is that we died. Our soldiers died, but they died in a higher way. You know, they didn't back out. They're not coward. They died and we took our land back. You know, the problem with the China is they always turn back and they don't stick with their own agreements. If they do so, there would be no problem as such. Now the China should understand that we are not the same India before independence or something like that. If they talk, we will talk. If they want to fight, we will fight. And yes, we have lost our soldiers, but we are very proud of them that they fought with it, and they fought with the situation as well. So
I'm
the situation
assuming
right now, it's a bit crazy.
I'm assuming you are in full support of Modi's government then.
Sir, it is not about Modi's government. I belong from a different political ideology and Modi belong from a different political ideology. But when there is a war, that doesn't mean the war is between Modi and China. The war is between India and China. And when it is a war, all the political ideologies should come under one umbrella. The umbrella should be one, and we have to unite together. Kashmir or our political ideology is our internal matter. I don't want to insult my country in front of outsiders, So if I have a tussle between Modi and Tausif Rahman, that doesn't mean I will complain about my PM outside my country. It is my matter, it is my family, and there are some internal matters between the two families, and we can fix it up. There are a lot of time. But right now, the situation is about war, and we will finish it very soon.
In a global
discussion or whatsoever.
In a world where globalization is so normal, you can't just claim to be a family and isolated by yourself. People sneeze in India, and we can hear it here. It's not.
Of course.
So you can't just say it's you can't just say it's an internal matter.
We have a different political ideology. Our thinking is very different, and the ruling government thinking is very different. But
no, hold on, Mr. Tausif.
Sir, if you call me during an election time, you will see me as a different person. I can go against Mr. Modi. He's a prime minister. But right now, the discussion is between Indo and China.
Fair enough.
So right now, we are all together. It is not about any party. The party is united, India is united, and we will fight with it.
It is true that in 1962, India suffered a major humiliation at the hands of the Chinese, right?
Yes, indeed.
It's not about a major humiliation. When war happens, it happens, and China also backs out. The problem is no country wants war. But the problem with China is they always back out with their own terms. And now if they want any tussle, and now if they want a war, trust me, India is ready for the war. But today, at today's news, I'm telling you that China is going back. They are backing out, and hopefully everything will be at peace.
Okay, well, let's go to the rest of the guests. I know the rest of you are itching to come in. I'm going to open up the floor to anyone to discuss, but let's go to Duncan Bartlett first. Duncan, I'm interested in what's going on in that region, primarily because, firstly, my parents come from Bangladesh, so I obviously have a personal stake in that region. But I have lived and done politics in this country all my life. So there is no personal interest in what happens in that country. But it is very strange that China, on one hand, has been seen as an occupying country, occupying Tibet, occupying many other places, including imprisoning and creating modern-day concentration camp for the Uyghur Muslims in China. Of course, they've been accused of all sorts. India is no different. It's been doing the same thing to the Muslims in India. Kashmir is one example. What it has been doing for the citizenship program that we have seen by its anti-Muslim sentiment, by Modi's government. So can we actually trust India or China when it comes to upholding human rights and international treaties? Can we?
Well, I think you make a lot of interesting points there. Let me just pick up on two of them. First of all, which is, I think, this theme of Indian nationalism or patriotism. And it's interesting, isn't it, that our panelist, Mr. Raman there, describes himself as a patriot, and even though he disagrees ideologically with Prime Minister Modi, he feels that India should stand as one country in opposition to China on this border issue. And of course, what happens in China when there is a confrontation with another country is that nationalism gets whipped up there. And in fact, one of the characteristics of China in the past 4 or 5 years under the leadership of President Xi Jinping is this mood of nationalism and patriotism, rallying around the flag. And I'm wondering how this incident in the Himalayas fits in with that. It's interesting, isn't it, that the Chinese were very cautious about revealing whether any of their soldiers had been killed, perhaps because they didn't want to have the bad publicity and criticism on social media as to what had happened. The other thing that we haven't talked about yet, which I think is very important, is the United States of America. Of course, The relationship between India and its neighbours, including Bangladesh and Pakistan, is crucial to the Asian region. But the really key event in India to this year to date, apart from the terrible coronavirus crisis, was the visit of Donald Trump back in January. And that was a time when Mr. Modi and Mr. Trump indicated that they would be firm friends. And in fact, India went on to sign a major defence deal with the United States. Can you imagine how China feels about that? China had been trying to win Indian hearts and minds. Mr. Modi and President Xi had had a number of summits, including one in December last year. But the message changed a lot at the beginning of 2020 when President Donald Trump was there. And I think now that Indian nationalism and Trump's brand of American first nationalism have something in common. And both of those are that they're quite anti-Chinese. So there was a pretty strong, let's put it this way, skeptical mood about China before the incident a couple of weeks ago in the Himalayas. And of course, what's happened now is that that's made the anti-China sentiment in India go stronger. One last thing to say about that. It's not just in India that that's happening. In Australia, in Canada, and here in the United Kingdom too, there's been a change in tack. Previously many governments thought, well, we can live with China, we can do business with them, there are many advantages to cooperation. People are rethinking the relationship with China, including India.
Some of my viewers have called in, and my social media friends and people who follow, they often say, can we trust China ever again? But that's a different discussion we'll have for another time. Let's go back to Mr. Chowdhury. Mr. Chowdhury, let's get back to India and China. What implication does this have for the geopolitical stability in the region? Bangladesh is at stake. Then you've got other countries, Pakistan, Afghanistan, you've got Nepal, you've got Burma, all of that. It could be a major problem if this went out of control. China would be supported by certain countries, India would be supported by other countries. Where do we go?
Thank you. Thanks for your question. It's a massive landscape. Yes, the canvas is so big. But let me tell you one by one. Let me pick China. China is trying to have an influence in the Indian region. It's been going on for a very long time. But that's a dream too far. It's not going to have any implication because the sovereign countries of Bangladesh, Nepal, and Bhutan, and India are not going to let China enter into this climax because there is a fear from all around. Myanmar has been sending 1 million+ refugees in Bangladesh, allegedly with the help of China. So Bangladesh is, overburdened with 1 million refugees from Myanmar, which we don't want. Secondly, you have to look at this. Nepal has been all of a sudden, out of the blue, they have started, doing a new demarcation of their maps. Now that puts Bangladesh into a massive dichotomy. Imagine if tomorrow there's something happens, is China eyeing Mongla port? Is China is going to go through the Siliguri chicken's neck or, corridor? So we have to be very, very careful. But in the context, Pakistan is out of the way because, Pakistan is, let's not talk about them because that's a rogue state, it's got, deep state, and they do things in a very different way.
Mr. Chowdhury.
So let's not talk about
Mr.
Pakistan.
Chowdhury, we can't say that about
out
Pakistan.
Of the way, because this is our region. Let's talk about this side of the Himalaya.
It's not fair for you to say that because Pakistan is not here. I have to do the honor of representing Pakistan for a second. Look, you can call Pakistan a rogue state, but Pakistan is a nuclear state. You can call Pakistan a rogue state. It probably has more democratically mandated government than your own government in Bangladesh. It probably has got more credibility in the world than your government has. You can't call a country which is democratically elected, has got nuclear power, and is trying to stabilize itself a rogue state. You can't do that.
Well, it is. Everybody knows about it.
Well, Bangladesh is known as a rogue state run by dictators and despots.
Anyway, let me just explain. Now, what happens? Bangladesh stands very firm that we are not, our defense policies, which has been, documented in 1974 by the father of the nation, and we are not here to fight anyone. We are not going to join any alliance or any fight.
But you are fighting. You are fighting in Bangladesh. In Bangladesh, what you're doing is, in the name of not fighting, you're silencing opposition, you're destroying all the infrastructure, you're allowing cronies to take over government in the country,
No,
and usurp the wealth of Bangladesh.
I'm just giving you an analysis. I'm not representing anyone.
So,
okay?
But Pakistan is doing the same thing. You can't call Pakistan a rogue state when your country does the same.
No. Our country is not the same. Pakistan has a very long legacy of suppressing, killing, genocide in Bangladesh. So how can you say they haven't done anything?
Let's go back to Kashmir. Let's go back to India and China.
Kashmir problem. The problem that Kashmir has is a minority of Muslims. Look, India is the second largest Muslim country in the world. It has got in excess of 200 million Muslims. Kashmir, the population is only 300,000. So if there was any persecution, any problem, and anything as serious as what you are trying to depict, that 200 million Muslims in India would have gone out in the street, and they could have done a lot of things.
And they haven't. And they haven't.
They haven't.
They haven't. Staggering. Let's go to Professor Bowring. Professor Bowring, I find
not doing anything.
I find Mr. Chowdhury's assertion staggering, baffling to be honest, and it borders to almost fabrication of the truth. Let's hear it from you, Professor Bowring.
So, as long as everyone doesn't talk at once, then it makes it more difficult. But what I think is the following: that rightly we mentioned Tibet and Xinjiang. The thing is that they are both part of China for quite a long time. And of course, China did have a system of respect for minorities and a degree of autonomy. And what's been happening inside China is horrific, as you rightly pointed out. And in particular, what's happening to the Muslim population in Xinjiang. But I don't think China has any designs on Bengal. And we have, of course, Mr. Rahman speaking from Kolkata. I don't think in Kolkata they're putting up the defenses against the forthcoming Chinese invasion. I don't think China has any designs on Bengal or on India for that matter. I think China is all about asserting itself as a great power. And of course, it only became a great power relatively recently. Now everyone has to reckon with it. And just going back to what you were saying about Donald Trump and India and what is happening there, the United States is so much weaker than it was 5 or 10 years ago even. The United States is a country which has definitively lost in Syria. They have been beaten by a combination of Iran, Russia, and Turkey. The United States is now in a very weak position compared with what it was. And of course, Mr. Trump, with his love affair with Kim Jong-un, and the love affair, I'm afraid to say, has turned out rather badly for Mr. Trump, not for Kim Jong-un. So I think any country which relies on the United States at the present time may be making a mistake.
Are you hinting that India is making a strategic mistake by allying itself with America? Is that what you're saying?
I think America is a busted flush increasingly, by the way. And any state which relies on America is trying to rely on something which is inherently these days unreliable.
And are you suggesting India therefore should either rely on Russia because Chinese can't be trusted as far as India is concerned?
I think India and Russia have much closer, actually, reasons for cooperation. And I think Russia is that much closer. I think for a series of problems that India has, and we mentioned Kashmir already, relations with Pakistan, I would say that as a counterweight to China, Russia is going to be much more important, as a matter of fact, for India. So I wouldn't be at all surprised if we saw some more meetings between Mr. Modi and Mr. Putin. And when we talk about nationalists, of course, Mr. Putin is absolutely a authoritarian conservative nationalist. That's what he's all about. And I think Putin and the Kremlin will see their interests as being seeking to balance China. You know, this is old-fashioned balance of power, great power politics.
Okay.
China has become too powerful. So this is back to the Congress of Vienna, almost. You know, I think its interests with Russia.
I think we go to Muhammad Tawsif Rahman. Muhammad Tawsif Rahman, so should India be more closer, now that you've abandoned China completely, you've put China in the bottom of the pile when it comes to disconnection and hatred, I suppose. Is it the new friend for India, Russians or Americans? Which one is it going to be?
Well, I would agree with Sir that, the major problem is if India is getting closer with US, what I personally believe, that there will be more enemies because of Donald Trump, because when India is doing Namaste Trump, and when India is calling Trump and Modi is going to the US, there is a slight problem that rest of the world is not liking it. Now, I believe that we don't need Russia, neither we need India. So I don't know what kind of strategy does Mr. Modi have with Mr. Trump and what Trump needs from India. The only thing I consider that India should focus on its own economy, own natural things, and they should focus on their own work. The major problem is, which I also believe, when you talk about Indo-China, I say unity. And when you talk about Indo and US, I think there is a problem. There's a big, big problem where, because of US, I think we will going to make a big mistake if we are really getting closer to the US, because US have its own strategy, they have their own thinking, and I don't know what actually they want.
Maybe.
Whereas concern about Mr. Donald Trump, the whole America is hating Mr. Trump right now. I think he's going to start his campaigning in US, and people are not liking it. So I would suggest Mr. Modi should be away from America, and I think we have a better opportunity to do something with Russia.
Mr. Chowdhury, Imran Chowdhury, do you think we should see Modi, including Nigel Farage and many other right-wing leaders, going over to America and campaigning for Donald Trump to become the next president? This way, China will not be able to cause any more trouble in this region?
You said, no, I don't want to see that. But if you look at the nation states at the moment, the nation states are going to be slowly and gradually, democratic nation state has a problem with the right-leaning politics, right? We can't stop it. If we don't, then it's a problem. But if the people want to vote, we have no choice. But there seems to be a decline to that side. But what I'm trying to say is Trump is American issue, but he has lost his clout. The America is not the America that we used to know. Now, Russia and India, historically, from the prism of 1971, Bangladesh Liberation War got India and Russia very close together. That friendship will remain always, and as much as India needs Russia, Russia actually needs India, because Russia has vested interest what happens after they pull out of the American troops from Afghanistan, and where does Afghanistan go to? Because this Central Asia has been a problem, and it is not going to go.
Well, China has heavily invested.
What China is trying to do, let me just give me 2 more seconds.
Yes.
What China is trying to do is taking the ramifications away from what it had been doing with the COVID-19, what it had been doing with the breaking the covenant of the Chinese and taking over of Hong Kong. They have just flexed their muscle in Vietnam. They have taken an oil rig in Malaysia. The main aim is, China's main aim is to control Bay of Bengal. It's not India, it's not Bengal through Siliguri corridor, it's Bay of Bengal. If anybody controls Bay of Bengal, he has a direct influence in the Indian Ocean. And anyone has a direct influence on the Indian Ocean that controls the 40% of the world trade. And that's what China is eyeing. So coming through Burma, coming and trying through Bangladesh or Orissa or Tamil Nadu, they have tried with Sri Lanka, miserably failed. Now they are up to something, because if you look at the Chinese map, they haven't got any freshwater port from the north of the China. So they need something in the Bay of Bengal, which they can probably convert into something that would give them the biggest cloud all the way up to Nicobar Island and all the way to Kanyakumari and the whole of this stretch of the Indian Ocean.
But
that's what China is eyeing. It's not land that China wants to grab.
I understand
that's
that.
Why they have gone to Balochistan. Balochistan is the first invasion by the Pakistanis in 1948. Okay, it's a state by itself. It did not join the Confederation of Pakistan, but Mr. Jinnah was the legal advisor of the Khalat of Balochistan, and he just unilaterally marched in the army, took it over, and taken everything
We're
off.
opening up another chapter. I just want to hold on, Mr. Chaudhry, hold on. I want to just to confirm what you have just said, so I understand and people are understanding. What you're saying is China is doing all of this to have influence in Bay of Bengal. Why would it attack Indian soldiers if they want to have influence over Bay of Bengal? And why would it attack?
What happened? We don't know what happened. We only know because India is a democratic country. India has to tell its people how many casualties have taken place. Now, China don't have to do that.
No, I didn't say that.
We don't know what's happened on the Chinese side.
I didn't say that, Mr. Chaudhry. I didn't say that. I said you're saying something very interesting. You're saying China wants to have control of Bay of Bengal. If it wants to have control of Bay of Bengal, why would it be fighting Indian soldiers in Himalayan regions, far away from Bay of Bengal?
You have to look at the map. Where India is building the road, it actually reaches the bend of the Karakoram highway, which goes to Balochistan. So that is
not Balochistan. We're talking about
interference for.
We're talking about Bay of Bengal. You said Balochistan is slightly separate. I said if China wants to have influence in Bay of Bengal, why would it be fighting Indian soldiers in Himalayas? Let's actually move on.
Ultimate aim is to get hold of the Bay of Bengal.
But how?
We all know
that
the world total trade of the world trade, 40% of the world trade has to ply through the waters of Indian Ocean.
Okay, let's ask others about the same perhaps.
Everybody can have his own view.
Mohammed Tausif Rahman, India is being, I don't know. I'm not feeling too confident that India will be able to ride this coming century in the way it has envisaged, because it's made some serious political blunders, including what it did in Kashmir and other things that it is doing with Bangladesh. I'm just worried that India is actually losing the plot.
So as far concerned as for the Kashmiris, there is a problem, and I would agree that there is some problem in Kashmir because of Article 370. People are not happy with 370. Moreover, the Kashmiri Pandits are very happy. They think they have got the base, which they got lost earlier. And right now, the local Kashmiris, they are very unhappy with Article 370, and which I also opposed. And I, being sitting with lots of debate, I was strictly against the Article 370. So because of Article 370, yes, there is a problem. And I'm sure Bangladesh, Nepal, Pakistan, we are having a very tough situation with all the neighbors as well. And I think we always have to look for the Kashmiris because, the Kashmiris are really not happy because of 370. Now, there is a damage, and the damage should be seen as quick as possible. And there are a lot of things to do. But as you say, that it's a very sensitive thing. And India won't lose a lot of things, but yes, if you just keep on making enemies and disturbing your neighbors, we are not disturbing our neighbors by any threatening or something like that, but because of some talking terms which is not agreeable, even Bangladesh is not much happy as of now.
The Bangladeshis are 80% Muslims, so they have a sympathy for the Muslims in India. And Mr. Chaudhry earlier on alluded to the fact that Indian Muslims have no problem; they're living in heaven almost. Well, I think Mr. Chaudhry. Hold on, Mr. Chaudhry.
It's not like that.
Let me finish.
It's not like that.
Yeah,
it's not like that.
Go on.
It's not like that. Again, I'm saying when you were asking me about the Indochina war, I said yes, we are united, but there is a problem, especially not with the Indians. There is a problem with this particular political party. the ruling party, which they are going against the minorities. That doesn't mean all the minorities would come up on the street and they will do some protests like what they did in US in last month and back few weeks. But the problem is CAA, NRC, and what they call Citizen Amendment Bill. Now, Bangladeshis are angry with the Citizen Amendment Bill, where their minorities, which are Hindu, where India claims that Bangladeshi Hindus are not happy, Pakistani Hindus are not happy. And now the prime minister of both the countries, including Nepal, Afghanistan, and such other countries, they are really not happy. They're saying that we have kept our people happy. And now India claims that these minorities staying in Pakistan, Afghanistan, and Bangladesh are not happy. So somewhere or the other, we are just, doing intruding with the sentiments. And this is not right, actually. Now, the problem is when you asked about the minorities in India, yes, even I protested. We don't want NRC, CAA, and CAB. We have a lot of other troubles in our country where we have to look into it. Because if you want to spend money on NRC, CAA, and Citizen Amendment Bill, to rechecking the Indians at the same times when they are Indians, it's kind of stupidity. But the ruling party has passed the law and they will do it very soon. But I'm sure, I'm telling you in your television, that there will be a protest soon. Just because of COVID-19, people are staying at their home and they're not stepping out. But as this COVID-19 fades away, this again, NRC, CA, and CAB will be on the street, and there will be a lot of propaganda and a lot of tamasha.
So my fear is almost confirmed, because I'm worried. Look, I'm of the opinion, and I'll give you my personal perspective. I'm of the opinion that separating India into three countries, Bangladesh, Pakistan, and India, was probably one of the biggest mistakes we've ever made in the history of humanity. That's my view.
Yes.
Yes.
Now,
that is the doing of the Bengalis.
Now, if we are going to continue this and seeing all of these nations fight between themselves, this makes the entire region very volatile and weak. So Chinese threat, Russian threat will absolutely be nothing, because they will just overwhelm us anytime they want.
Sir, when we speak about Pakistan, Pakistan, China is more dangerous than Pakistan. There's a propaganda between India and Pakistan, and I'm telling you clearly, actually we don't come to know what's happening between India and Pakistan. There's a ceasefire and there's a lot of war happening. They kill the Pakistani soldiers. Pakistani claims that we kill Indian soldiers. Then in between, some militant from Kashmir, they arrive, So we have seen since childhood, but China is more dangerous. If India stop buttering China unnecessary, we can fight with China and we can give them reply. And now, as you said, there was a big mistake dividing India, Pakistan, and Bangladesh. Oh, yes, it was. I see no benefit in today's day that why Pakistan, Bangladesh is away from us. It could be a strong and huge country with a lot of power. But the problem is, sometimes I believe the ruling government in India, they just want to politicize and want to play a communal role. And, when I'm saying this, it might have effect on my statement. And if some Indians watching this, a pro-Modi fan, they won't like it what I'm saying right now. But this is the reality. Muslims are facing trouble in India, and no one can deny that.
Except Mr. Chowdhury, who thinks they're living in heaven.
No, it's not. It's not Mr.
You just said a few minutes ago there is no problem with the Muslims in India.
Listen, let me explain this to you. 200 million
Sir, if a Muslim is having a problem in India, that doesn't mean, as you said, crores of Muslims should come on the road and destroy the properties.
So what I'm saying is it is democratically solvable problem. Okay. So we don't have to follow the path of violence. Indian Muslims are very mature.
Nobody's
Muslims.
suggesting
They
anything
can
to do with violence.
But we don't have to.
For you to deny that Muslims in India are having a problem, that in itself is a problem. But let's go to Mr. Duncan Bartlett. He has been silent for a while. Sorry, Mr. Bartlett.
Having problem. You can't deny that.
Fine. Let's go to Mr. Duncan Bartlett for a minute, just so that we get everybody to participate in the conversation. We have gone all over the place, but that's why I'm bringing you in, Mr. Bartlett, to put us on the track. We're talking about China and India. What future do you see between these two countries?
Well, one aspect that we haven't talked about, which seems to be extremely important, is the economic relationship.
Yes.
Frankly, China isn't very interested in the relationship between the different religious groups in India. It's irrelevant to most Chinese people. And if you look at the way in which Chinese people are educated about the world, they don't learn very much about India. They do learn a lot about the United States. The United States is presented as being an imperial power, a bully. They talk about the century of humiliation that they've suffered at the hands of the Americans and their allies, and they want to see an end to that. That's the basis of the Chinese dream, and that's an absolute key policy of President Xi Jinping. And against that, and it would be parallel with that, in fact, it's not in conflict with it at all, is the plan to lift China out of poverty. A few weeks ago, China said that it achieved an amazing milestone. It had made almost everybody in China out of poverty. And there was then a big debate about what poverty actually is in China. But I mean, you've got something like an average income in China of $12,000 US compared to something like 2,000 in India. So there's a very big wealth gap on average to these large population countries. So whatever you think about China's ideology, it can't be doubted that within the last 10 or 15 years, there's been some pretty amazing economic progress. And you can also say that that's increased China's influence all over the world, including in the rest of Asia. India would also like to achieve that. Now, one way to do that, of course, is to do more trade with China. But not surprisingly, Mr. Modi's been cautious about that because the Chinese ideological system, central communist system, is very different to India's multi-party democracy. Culturally, the two countries don't have all that much in common, not linguistically, not racially, and historically, of course, they've been rivals in the region for many centuries. So it's difficult to see an alliance, but there could be more trade, and that could be advantageous to Indian businesses. And I think that's the sort of thing that Mr. Modi has been, that Mr. Xi has been promising to Mr. Modi quietly in a discreet way at those high-level summits. And of course, this is the thing that also gives China great influence across the rest of Asia, including in Bangladesh. Last time I was in Dhaka, I saw the Friendship Center, which was built with Chinese money, and I went to see that huge bridge, which is also being built with Chinese expertise. So China realizes that the rest of Asia looks to it for guidance in taking its people out of poverty. And of course, one of the reasons why people get frustrated about issues like religion, and I'm sure they're going to get very frustrated about the inequalities which have been thrown up in India as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic, is because a lot of people are not being able to get good jobs, they're worried about their future economically, and they're worried about the prospects for their families.
Mr. Bartlett, not to be rude to you, but we have to take a break right now because our break time is scheduled to the 2nd. So do forgive me for butting in the middle, but I will come back to you when we get back after the break. So don't go anywhere, gentlemen. You've joined us by Zoom from wherever you are. I'm very grateful. And to our viewers, don't go anywhere. We'll be back after this break, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome back to our program. I hope you're well and you are enjoying our Let's Talk program. We're talking about India, we're talking about China, and of course the whole region. When you talk about India and China, you can't escape the reality that the whole region is a volatile mixture of stable, unstable governments, freedom, dictatorship, despotism, corruption, nepotism, all sorts of names and labels are thrown in each and every direction. But it's important to understand a substantial number of human race live and exist in that region. A large number, in fact, a huge number. And therefore, its stability and its future is the stability and the future of the entire humanity. If India was taken as one country, it's nearing to 1 billion. But if you put India, Bangladesh and Pakistan together, and then China on the other hand, that's almost 2 billion people. That's 2 billion out of the 7 billion of world's population. That's not a small place. It's a huge number. And stability and peace and security of those people is paramount to world security. And that's why we're talking about it. If you've got any questions, any points to raise, if you want to simply join in the conversation, you can. Of course you can. The number is on the screen, as you can see. Call us, express your views, ask your questions to our guests, and even challenge them if you want. I have been joined by three guests at the moment. The fourth one, unfortunately, has disappeared. I hope it's not Indian government cutting his internet connection. Anything is possible. He's from Kolkata. Modi's government may have heard that he's speaking here against Modi's government. I don't know. It's all possible. But anyway, let's not worry until we find him. Professor Bowring is still with us. We're very grateful. We have Mr. Imran Chowdhury is still with us. We're very grateful for that. And Mr. Duncan Bartlett is also with us. We're grateful to you all, gentlemen. Duncan Bartlett, you were speaking before we went into a break, and I rudely interrupted you. Really sorry. But I've been given instructions clearly that we must take a break for prayer break. So we can't mess around with prayers. Forgive us. Do you want to finish your point, and then I'll go to Professor Bowring?
Well, I was going to say that the impressive thing about China, of course, has been its very robust economic growth over the past 10 years. Now, of course, China is in the early stages of a recession as a result of the COVID-19 outbreak, and that's going to be a huge problem all over the world. But it does mean that countries will need to find ways to cooperate. Does China depend on India for economic growth? Absolutely not. Could India benefit if countries decide that they're not going to cooperate with China? Perhaps. Because one of the things that we've seen has been a review of how dependent countries are on China. Here in the UK, for example, the British government has noticed that we were dependent on China for some vital medical equipment, and it wants to make sure that that's no longer the case. It thinks it could be a potential security risk. As you also know, there's a big debate about how involved China should be in things like running the 5G telecommunications network. Perhaps Indian companies might be able to take advantage if people from other countries decided that they didn't want to go with the Chinese, they might go with the Indians instead. After all, India has asserted itself as being one of the world's leaders in terms of new technology, in terms of computers and microprocessors and so on. It's a long way behind those East Asian countries, but perhaps this time of change and disruption caused by COVID-19 could create new economic opportunities for India. And perhaps those opportunities will also be available to other Asian countries, including Bangladesh.
Okay, well, Bangladesh is doing very well economically, at least that's what we've been told. So I don't think China
Bangladesh had been doing well in terms of its economic growth, but I mean, it was coming from a very low base. So, I mean, overall, the level of income and the overall economy of Bangladesh was still very low in comparison to even India and in particular in comparison to China. So that's why, of course, the successive governments in Bangladesh have been very open to Chinese investment.
Okay, well, let's go to Professor Bill Bowring there for future predictions. Now, how do you imagine the region developing? Do you think China and India could coexist as brotherly, neighborly neighbors with their nuclear buttons right at their fingertips and not press it and not fight again and not see the loss of lives that we have seen tragically in the border region? Can you see that, Professor Bowring?
Well, I mean, going back to what I was saying a few minutes ago, I think we're back in classic balance of power, great power politics. Mm-hmm. And I think there is a readjustment going on. By the way, I'm very interested in the fact that nobody so far has mentioned Hong Kong. Where we have the final humiliation of the former colonial power. And of course, Britain is now in the position. I was going to insist on this with the Foreign Office, but it now seems that Dominic Raab himself is going to suggest that all of the people in Hong Kong who've got these passports of United Kingdom and colonies, which don't give them the right to live in the UK, should be invited to the UK. And of course, China finds this to be really quite unacceptable for obvious reasons. And I think that what happened a few days ago for my birthday, actually, is it happened on the non-border or the line between China and India. It looks like it was an ambush by the Chinese, by the way, but it's really, on the grand scale of things, a very small skirmish. And I think there are much bigger issues going on in the region, of which I think Hong Kong is very important. And that, at the moment, I would say, is one of the most dangerous periods for the people who actually have to live there. By the way, just to say that last weekend, next weekend, taking part in the Council of the International Association of Democratic Lawyers, and we had their representatives from India, from Bangladesh, from Philippines, from North Korea, from South Korea. Did we have anyone from China? No, we didn't. And so everybody at that meeting from the region, from Japan as well, in the background all the time is the fact that we now have China as a great power, asserting itself as a great power. And that is what Xi Jinping, of course, has been setting himself up for. Isn't it interesting that Mr. Putin is trying to follow in the footsteps of Xi Jinping and to have constitutional amendments, which will also make him president for life?
He's already a president for life, Professor Bowring, if you haven't noticed. He has been a president for life for all that I remember. Who else has been a president in the last 20 years?
Well, he hasn't. He's always said that he can only serve a certain number of terms, and that's why he had to drop out for 3 years.
I see.
And being the prime minister. But now he's going to change the constitution, I think, on the Chinese model. And I think many Russians look at China and they think, actually, had Andropov lived and the Communist Party stayed in control, then Russia could have gone the same way as China. And I think many people in Russia...
But, Professor, you have
great regret at the fact that Gorbachev came along, the Soviet Union collapsed, and the Russians had 10 wasted years in terms of economy, at the same time that China was really putting itself together. So,
but do you still think, my question still remains unanswered, and that is, do you think China and India could coexist as friendly neighbors, or would they have to exist as arch enemies from here on?
I don't think it has to be. I don't think that's a binary choice, by the way. I mean, they're neighbors, they can't get over that fact. Whether they're going, I don't think they're going to be particularly friendly, and they have very different interests. But there's no reason why there should be conflict either. Okay. I think these are two countries with very different histories, with very different cultures. And I think India has an awful lot going for it in the future, as was mentioned, particularly in the fields of software and IT development. I think India actually will take us all by surprise. And I think China, which has been the great manufacturing titan, actually is going to find itself, I think, competing with India. But they're going to live together. Fair to say that's how it is. The same way, Britain now pretends that it has nothing to do with Europe. Really.
Okay.
Well, let's. There's only 20 miles between us and France, so we just have to get used to the fact that even if we're not members of the EU, we are actually in this continent.
Well, we don't have such skirmishes between French and the British in the middle of the channel, so we're very lucky and very fortunate. Let's go to Tausif, who is returned. Tausif, I was just getting worried if you've been picked up by your Modi's government for speaking against him. Just the thought was making me very worried. You're okay? You're safe?
Yeah. I was having some Wi-Fi issues and my battery got drained. So I was just preparing myself because I'm so sorry. I apologize to all my panelists for making you all wait. I'm sorry.
No, you didn't make us wait. We continued, just prayed for you that you will return in one piece. Let's go to Ms. Chowdhury. I'll come back to you, Tausif, for your thoughts. Mr. Chowdhury, now what does India and Russia, what kind of relationship do you envisage, do you dream of for them, and do you suggest for them?
Well, thank you for the question. I don't envisage anything. India and Russia, historically, they have a fantastic relation since October 1971, and it has perpetuated and matured since then. Now, Russia needs India more than India needs Russia. India might use Russia as a wedge in terms of having a negotiation with China. To answer your question, China and India will live together as peaceful neighbors for the days to come. The biggest problem that I can envisage is out of this whole climax of this COVID-19 and everything, I did mention about the Hong Kong, I did mention about the Vietnam and Malaysia. The Hong Kong issue, China is trying to divert the world attention to Indian border skirmishes. Basically, out of all of this, the biggest casualty will be the internationalism and globalization. Japan has already pledged $240 billion for its company to pull out from China, right? Which I'm sure a lot of sovereign European countries would do the same. So China is not going to be the friends of everyone for the coming few years. China will again become, as it used to be known as, the sleeping dragon. It's going to be a sleeping dragon again, but it has a lot of muscles, a lot of power. It is the local bailiff in the debt-ridden countries where it's invested more than the World Bank, the IMF, and everyone else. So if Kenya tomorrow can't pay the premium or the insurance on the monthly payment of its port, or in any other African countries, what China will do is take it over, right? So this is how China is going to fan out into poorer spectrum of the world. But globalization-wise, China will lose a lot of business from the Northern Hemisphere. Northern Hemisphere, if we are not careful, there could be a chance that Northern Hemisphere, many of the countries will go into right-wing, right-leaning political parties slowly and gradually taking over, which we may not want, but that looks like, in the next election, you don't know where Le Pen is going in France. So I can see that India is going to have a very, very good time in the sector of the IT and having a lot of subcontract manufacturing. Now, we can't stop it because India has been perceived as a reliable business partner by the world. Because if you look at the scenario, China may be doing this lead machine work, but when it comes to finance and accounting is done in India. So India always has a value-added international trade than that of China. Now, because of this COVID-19, because of this ramification, Hong Kong is going to upset a lot of people, because if you remember, it just happened in front of our eyes in 1997, yes, when Sir Chris, I can't remember his last name. Chris Patton was signing the document. I was watching it, and I've been to Hong Kong many a times. It is a place very close to my heart. And I was thinking that Hong Kong will remain as an economic hub separate from the Chinese Communist Party, but which is not going to happen. So what's going to happen is China might think that Britain is going to depopulate Hong Kong. So there could be a big problem. Out of all this problem, the beauty of it is India will benefit, and the next 10 years is going to be the Indian golden year. We may not like it, but that's the way the world economics is going to go to. And the tariff and the Chinese importation in America is going to be hard. No matter what we say, what we speculate, Trump is going to come back because he still controls those heartlands of the voters and the caucuses that needs to make him the next president.
Okay. Well, lots of predictions. He did not focus only on China and India. You gave a prediction for the whole world, which is very good. Let's go to Mr. Duncan Bartlett about predictions for the future. Mr. Bartlett, what do you see this Chinese-Indian relationship emerging as? Just as a last word before I go to Tawsif.
Well, I think what's likely is that China is going to be turning in on itself a bit more. I'm not getting the impression, particularly, that the Belt and Road Initiative to invest in developing and middle-income countries around Asia has proved to be a particular success, particularly now that the Chinese economy is going to be suffering this enormous stress, as a result of the COVID-19 crisis. The other thing is that China is finding it difficult to get cooperation. Pakistanis, still friends of the Chinese, but other countries around Asia are really thinking about whether or not they can continue to be partners of the Chinese economically when the Chinese have proved themselves to be so assertive and you could say even confrontational. As Mr. Chowdhury mentioned there, a lot of democracies in the region, especially India, feel sympathy with the situation of the protesters in Hong Kong, and the new security laws that China are introducing have caused conflict, have caused pain to the supporters of democracy in the United States, the European Union, Great Britain, Australia, Canada, and indeed in India as well.
Okay,
so I think China is quite isolated, and I think that means that India will probably, well, I think we've seen it already with the indication of the visit by Donald Trump earlier on this year, will move itself into a closer alliance with the United States and the Quad countries, Japan and Australia.
Okay, thank you. Let's go to Mohammed Tawsif Rahman for your thoughts about your own country and its relationship with China. I know you don't want a relationship, but you can't run away from the fact that you share a border.
Sir, I believe being China as a neighbor, I don't think so there will be a lot of friendship and we'll be an enemy as well. So I think it will be a very subtle relationship with them as long as they don't breach any agreement with us. And end of the day, we have a trade business with China as well, which is huge in numbers. And India is facing a lot because of China, because there are a lot of traders who cannot run their business. There are a lot of aspects. There are a lot of opportunity which China was having with India. And, it's from the both sides. China should not think that, China is only exporting and importing with us. It's not like that. Even we are sending a lot of stuff to China and we are the buyers and we are the big sellers. In fact, we're one of the largest buyers for China. So it's always both sides. He's not swinging in one way. It's always swinging both way. So China have to understand what kind of relationship they want to keep with India. Because if China thinks they are the superpower, they have to understand that India is in the border as well, and we are the neighbors. If they are doing any production at their end, we are the buyers that we are buying in huge number and large numbers. So, India and China both have to be in an equilibrium position so that we can just live our life peacefully. So, but if China have this kind of thought that, no, we are in the superpower position and we can beat India at any cost, so that's not going to happen. So when you ask me whether we will have friendship or being an enemy with them, I don't think so. We'll just have a settled relationship with them. It can't be smooth, it can't be rough. They be okay, we be okay, and it'll be fine.
It sounds like a couple broken up in a marriage and they just coexist because they have to coexist because they've got children together. But hey, who wants to have a broken marriage with India or China? I certainly don't want to have one, but never mind, that's the truth. Let's finally go to Professor Bowring for the last words. Professor Bowring, prediction for the future, not just for China and India, but globe. What do you think?
My prediction for the future is the really dangerous part of the world is the Middle East, actually. I would say that what's happening between China and India is friction, but I think they will live together. I think India, I totally agree with our colleague, Mr. Chowdhury, that there is a golden future for India. I think India will do increasingly well. However, I think the Middle East, particularly because of the interventions in Libya and Iraq and what's been happening in Syria, that I think is quite incredibly dangerous. And with Israel annexing the Palestinian territories or not, Trump interfering in that or not. So that is, I think, what we all have to watch with great fear and apprehension. So I think your part of the world, colleagues in Bangladesh, in Bengal, and I think Duncan Bartlett with your particular interest in Japan, and I think they are obviously very concerned with what China is doing, particularly in the South China Sea.
Okay, thank you very much.
I think that part of the world will sort itself out, actually.
I hope so. I hope coronavirus was one of those triggers that I thought would have woken up the whole of humanity to sort itself out, put the world right by dealing with one another fairly, justly, equitably, but greed and desire for power and have selfishness and all the rest dominating our current narrative. I don't have much hope. But I certainly hope that India and China don't go into war with one another. I certainly hope the neighboring countries, Bangladesh, Pakistan, Nepal, Burma and others also coexist in peace and harmony. I certainly will be watching with close eyes, open eyes rather, and being very concerned if there is any negative development. Ladies and gentlemen, let's pray for world peace before we finish our program. Until next time, from me, a very hearty good evening, and thank you very much for watching, as well as my great gratitude to my guests who have been so patient and have joined us from all over the world. Duncan Bartlett, Lieutenant Imran Chowdhury, Mohammed Tawsif Rahman, and Bill Bowring. Thank you, gentlemen, again, and from me and from my colleagues in the studio, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.